Welcome to Mandolin. Today, taking a look at my top 5 beginner tips I would give to somebody just starting out on the mandolin here. And of course, I mean, we're talking mandos, but this would really apply to any instrument, certainly any stringed instrument. But just 5 things I see kind of the same mistakes people just starting out seem to make a lot that will really hold you back here. So let's see if we can sidestep a few of these things and jump right into it. Hey, before we get started, be sure to subscribe down below. Mandolin do a lot of these lessons and tutorials and sometimes gear reviews and stuff. There'll be links down there, you know, for the merch, PayPal, and Patreon page. And let me know, let me know where you're watching from in the world so I can put a pin on my map for you. All right, let's jump right in. All right, tip number 1. You have to be playing a mandolin that's been properly set up. If not, really nothing else you do is going to matter that much. And it doesn't matter if you've just bought a $9,000 Gibson or a $70 Rogue. The setup is where everything is going to start. And of course you can do it yourself, and there's plenty of videos online. But if you live within 100 miles of someone who can do it professionally, especially if you're just starting out, man, I would recommend that. It is a world of difference. And what do I mean by being set up? Well, because people will say it's in tune with itself. What does that mean? Because if we don't do this right, you know, here's our A string, right? Even if you tune this to A and you're dead on, that won't be a B. So if you go to play a G chord, like your open 2 strings would be in tune, but this wouldn't be, no pun intended, out of tune a little bit. This one would be out of tune. You know, this would not really be a G. This B might be a little sharp or flat. And the further you work up the net, you know, the C would be a little bit more sharp or flat. By the time you get up to D, you know, you could be way off. These notes are not going to be true, even if you're dead on in tune on your open notes. So you've tuned this thing to your blue in the face, and every one is just dead on. But when you play the chord, it's going to sound all wobbly and wonky. When you're playing notes, they're not going to be in tune. And there's nothing you can do about it. You've tuned it, you've got your tuner out, and you're dead on. But if you don't have that intonation set right, I mean, it's dead in the water from the start with. So even if you try to avoid getting an overly cheap instrument to start with, but if you have to, you have to, right? Whatever gets strings under your fingers to start with. But on a cheap one, you are going to get frustrated with it soon and want to upgrade. But whatever your instrument is, have the thing set up as much as professionally as you can, and that's going to help so much. All right, tip number 2, you have to be in tune. Really be specific when you're tuning and take the time to get it right. This is your new best friend if you've recently bought a mandolin. Is that you and that tuner are going to be spending some quality time together, because you need to make sure each string is tuned to the right note, and then that both strings are tuned perfectly together. And I've got some other videos about tuning either here in the Patreon. Sometimes I lose track of where I've put the things over time. But there's, you know, be good at tuning, because tuning is the most important. If you're perfectly in tune and your instrument is set up, it's just a G chord. The simplest thing will just sound so great. If you're not in tune, doesn't matter what you do, the world's greatest music ever written, it's not going to be good. Be really picky about your tuning and get that thing down before you start playing, or no one's going to want to listen to you. All right, tip number 3 is just as I've seen people be way too tense as they're playing in both hands. So the tip is to try to relax. You got to try to relax your hands. You're not going to be able to move fast and smooth if everything is tense. And I don't know, it's hard for me to demonstrate being tense, but you want, you know, it's not as hard. It's not really that hard to push down on these strings. You don't have to put too much force down. You want to be using this, if you see white on your knuckles or anything, you're having to press down way too hard. Maybe you're playing a cheap instrument that makes you have to press down if the strings are like really high up off the neck. But press down as lightly as you can get away with, and everything is just loose. Your wrist is loose here, your fingers are loose, and just kind of positioned over the fretboard. And you don't want to tense up, because when you tense up, you can't be smooth, you can't be fast, and you lose a lot of your feel here. So the tip is to try to relax and do everything loose and easy here. All right, tip number 4 involves keeping your hand in place and using different fingers for the notes. Because what I've seen people do, like going up a major scale, is use, say, one finger. Whoops, let it focus back in on me here. One finger, which is tempting, especially at first, because that's your strongest finger, or maybe this one. You might do it that way, but you want to avoid this, because you're not going to be able to say a simple scale run if you're doing that with one finger. You're just not going to be able to move your hand around smoothly enough or fast enough to keep up with anything. So the game is, you assign a finger, a couple frets per finger usually. Like this finger will pick up anything on the 1st or 2nd fret. This finger picks up anything on the 3rd. This guy picks up anything on the 4th or 5th. And pinky will do anything on the 6th and 7th. So without moving your hand, you can cover most of the fretboard here. And also, you want to keep the fingers, you don't want them when they're not playing, you don't want them way up here. You just want them just barely off the fingers. So you're moving just almost spider-like with your fingers across the frets. And then you don't have to, we're just avoiding chasing the note with one finger. I guess the gist of this one. Bad. Good. All right, let's check out the next one. All right, my last tip really just involves patience. If you're working through, I'm teaching out of this book sometimes, or over on the Patreon page and stuff. But if you're working through any sort of written material and you come across something that's difficult, the tendency is, I've noticed, for people just to move past it. And instead of pounding at the thing, if there's a part of a tricky part of a song or something, just isolate that part and play it 100 times if you have to. Play it 150 times until you think that in your sleep. It takes sometimes. You really have to pound at the thing. I've noticed if there's a tricky part, like I say, sometimes inclination is just to move on by it. And people just seem too anxious to move past an exercise. When I used to take, guitar lessons and stuff for years, and the acceptable thing was always, if you can play it 3 times through without screwing it up, you're probably good to move on past it. If you can't play it 3 times in a row perfectly, you got to keep at it. All right, thanks for joining me here for our look at 5 beginner tips. Again, just recapping, be sure the instrument is properly set up. Make sure you're in tune. Make sure the hands are nice and relaxed. You're using the correct fingering, and that you're not rushing past the exercise or song, whatever you're trying to play, until you can actually play it. Keep those 5 things in mind, and you're going to be a step ahead of the game as we get going here. And of course, I've got plenty of beginner level exercises and lessons and tutorials here on the channel, or over on the Patreon page, where I walk step by step through that beginner book we were talking about before. But hey, 5 things here just to hope you keep in mind and can help you along the way. And thanks for tuning in to Mandolin, and we'll see you next time.